For Learning Module 4, we'll be taking a wide-angle view, taking in and reflecting on the relation between play and the body, the embodied nature of play, and the embodied nature of theology. So in this lecture, I'll address the theological concept of incarnation and sexuality and play in Christian theology, and how the notions of beauty and truth speak to our theologies of play. You will read about experiences of grief and loss from Michael Koppel, and the relationship of play and pain in Brian Edgar. And you will revisit issues of power and identity and the imaginary in the play of children. And we will do our best to tie all of this together. In terms of theology of the body, sexuality, and play, if some adults have a difficulty with play and playing, one of the reasons for that may be in the bodily nature of play. Yes, there are mind games and computer games and so forth that require very little use of the body, and people enjoy those. I do myself. Not necessarily because they are sedentary, but because they engage the mind, the brain. We're told by the medical community that keeping the brain active is very important for health. That aside, for some adults, our inhibitions about play may stem from a discomfort with moving our bodies, fear of how we look when we play, or even shame of our bodies, lack of athleticism, etc. Now you may say, well, what about those thousands of people we see out jogging? Well, thankfully, not all of us have a fear or a dysfunctional relationship with our bodies. Perhaps they are jogging to overcome that so that their bodies can get in shape as a means of loving their body by taking care of it. I'm not a runner myself, but I am told that running gives a sense of euphoria and is, for many, a spiritual practice. Yet, for many of us, there is a discomfort with the body, a poor relationship with one's body, a sense of deep vulnerability in one's body. And here I'm drawing on the work of Stephanie Pausel. Her book is called Honoring the Body, Meditations on a Christian Practice. Poor body image is a real problem in our culture, with much of media telling us how we ought to look or what is beautiful. The dualism between body and spirit, fostered for many years by Christian tradition, conveyed the body as evil, a trope that seeped deep into the mindset of humanity for many centuries and perpetuated distorted meanings of gender. But this is an oversimplification, but this Platonic dualism was perpetuated in Christian thought by Augustine and other early theologians. However, in Christian theology, as James B. Nelson has pointed out in his classic book of 1992 entitled Body Theology, there is a more positive view of the body in Christian theology. Pope John Paul II wrote about a theology of the body some years ago that challenged some of the effects of dualism in the Christian faith. And Pope Francis has been known for his writings on the body and interest in sport. And I'm going to post an interesting short article about Pope Francis and sport from the National Catholic Reporter that I think you'll find interesting. Indeed, the Christian faith is about embodiment, the incarnation, becoming flesh, about the real connection between humanity and God. The human person is a body, but it is more than a physical being, more than a collection of cells, tissues, and organs. The human being transcends the categories of chemistry and biology and can only be understood in relation to God, the Creator. This is the mystery of creation, of our being created in God's image. It is a theology that affirms the wholeness of our embodied selves. An incarnational understanding of sexuality was lost in the Christian tradition as patterns of domination, patriarchy, and submission were assumed. Feminists suggest that the body is devalued because it is associated with femaleness, the female body representing the sex act and being the place for carrying children, and it is associated with temptation, concupiscence. We are uncomfortable with too much bodiness. Yet we are born sexual beings. Sex may tell us something about what Jesus has done in the incarnation. Sexuality being more than genitals, but involves the whole person. Although sex has been reduced, often to genital manipulation, but sex represents the inner longing, the drive in Freudian terms for pleasure or play. This is eroticism from the Greek eros. It is pleasure that God has called good. Sex is pleasure and play because it is embodied longing. It is for its own sake. And erotic communication is a means of grace, a gift. Today, sexuality suffers from factors which make for depersonalization, dehumanization, and exploitation. In this genitalization of sex, people have sex before or without kissing. Sexuality is pornographetized, all about power and dominance. And that does not sound very much like play to me. And as I mentioned above, we have been pummeled with notions of what the body should look like, as if there is a universal normative understanding of beauty determined by, well, whom? The media, the marketplace, consumers. The glorification of the perfect body and deification of thinness, the diet culture commodifies the body and sexuality. According to Sarah Coakley, an Anglican theologian, the postmodern obsession with the right body has rendered the body devoid of religious meaning. And this is from her book entitled Powers and Submissions: Spirituality, Philosophy, and Gender. She agrees that we have an inadequate and secularized understanding of the body. No longer is the body seen as having capacity for fluidity into the divine. She writes, "The body is shorn of any expectation of new life beyond the grave. It has shrunk to the limits of individual fleshiness. Hence, our only hope seems to reside in keeping it alive, youthful, consuming, sexually active, and jogging on, literally, for as long as possible." This mechanistic, machine-like, materialistic view of the body and health says that the body is only parts to be fixed, treated, or done, as in having work done. But yet, I love these words from novelist Toni Morrison in her wonderful novel Beloved, in which the character Baby Shugs speaks about flesh more holistically as connected to the self. Here she said, and I quote, "In this place, we flesh. We is flesh. that weeps, laughs, flesh that dances on bare feet in the grass. Love it. Love it hard. Yonder they do not love your flesh. They despise it. You got to love it. This is flesh I'm talking about here. Flesh that needs to be loved. Unquote. We love our flesh because it is of God, because it is beautiful, and we love God with all our hearts, minds, souls, and bodies, our whole selves. And in that wholeness, that shalom, we can love others, our neighbors as ourselves, in dynamic, creative, imaginative relationships. Catherine Lagunna, as quoted in Edgar's book, says that the life of God, precisely because God is triune, does not belong to God alone. The divine life is also our life, and play, as an intrinsically engaging and joyful activity, expresses this interactive dynamic more effectively than any other metaphor. But yet another aspect here is the question of how we address suffering of the body, and body includes mind, pain and grief and loss. Michael Koppel talks about grief and how play might offer insights into pastoral care. And Edgar introduces the idea of suffering with a discussion of Bonhoeffer, who in his most dire circumstances saw play as a result of an attitude of faith and trust in God. Now, while I appreciate some of what Edgar says, I do not ascribe to the soul-building interpretation of suffering and evil and theodicy that pain and suffering bring spiritual growth. His claim is that the agnostic element of the spiritual life, meaning the struggles, the challenges, the difficult times, perfects the character and strengthens the soul. And that's close to me. To me, that's close to the view that suffering and hardship are good for us and serve an eschatological function to prepare for the kingdom. While one can certainly play in the midst of pain and learn from pain, the soul-building theodicy is very close to saying that God causes suffering, or that it is God's will, or that everything happens for a reason, which I find very problematic. But you read that and see what you think. In thinking about beauty and truth in play, perhaps in play at its best, we express beauty and truth much like art. For example, I think of dressage, the beauty of dressage, a horse in mid-jump, or a swimmer's butterfly stroke, or even the beautiful mind of the chess player about to make a move. Some movements, like the swimmer's stroke, of course, like art, express truth better than others, or come closer to it. But we're always trying. Beauty is revealed in the course of an experience with an object, like a work of art or activity. We understand that truth is a religious concept, because religion makes truth claims, but beauty is a religious concept as well. Speaking from a Christian perspective, God's creation is beautiful and good, we claim. Though there is much that is not beautiful as well, we can and do make claims about God's touch, the touch of the divine, giving something beauty. There is the age-old question, is beauty just a matter of taste? is it relative? I turn here to the Enlightenment thinker Immanuel Kant, well known for his writings on aesthetic judgment. I can't go very deep here, and their whole philosophy course is dedicated to this subject, but Kant was instrumental in helping us understand the nature of beauty. We may say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, a relativist view, but that is not how we think and act. We think and act as if there are things that are more beautiful than others. However, for Kant, there was not something inherent in an object that makes it beautiful. Beauty is not a property, but beauty is how we respond to it. There are things we can agree on that make something beautiful, things that endure. Personal taste is definitely not all of it. There's both a subjective and universal quality to beauty. Judgments about beauty are not confined to external perceptions of beauty either. This must be beauty because the magazines tell us so, for example. We receive pleasure from beauty, from beholding something beautiful. Artists depict the beauty of the body, whether it be Rodin's The Thinker or the more grotesque renderings of Francesco Albano, as in the so-called ugly beauty. And I'm going to send you a link to a work on the grotesque in art and literature. There are many similarities with the concept of truth. Truth is a property of statements. But truth and falsity are tricky matters. Something that can be partially true or a guess at truth. That is not to say that truth cannot be established with any validity. That's relativism again, as in some thinking that we hear these days. But truth is not static, determined once and for all, but nor is it up for grabs. Art expresses truth as we see it. The truth is not always pretty, but coming to truth is a beautiful thing. When truth is revealed, it teaches us something we need to know. For example, the truth of racism in sport, particularly baseball in this case, was revealed in both play and art. The ugly truth was revealed in Jackie Robinson's playing of baseball, and it was brought out in the film named 42, which was his number. One might say that the truth in that, the ugly truth, was in fact beautiful because we learned something from it. Well, this is a little abstract, and what does it have to do with play? So let's bring it home. Play, as we have seen, can be an expression of power, exclusion, competition, deceit, and violence. But it can also be an expression of truth and beauty, and theology is very much concerned with these things. Play can express truth or truths in what we do with our minds and bodies with others. In attempting to figure out things like best courses of action, how to live, I think of the play of children, what is fair, right, and good. It can express our attempts, our strivings to reach higher, further, longer towards something outside ourselves. We play to express the truths of play, and these truths have theological meaning. The philosopher Charles Taylor, who wrote The Secular Age, argues that beauty is an aid to being moral, not moralistic in the sense of rules, reward, and punishment, but beyond that, a moral state a state attained through play in the way we create and respond to beauty. And further, he suggests this is where theology and the Christian life comes in. And I agree. We can promote play that aims for the best expressions of beauty and truth and goodness. And may I suggest that this is play gone good. Thank you.